March 18th, 1925. A date almost synonymous with tornadoes, as it was the day of the Great Tri-State Tornado. What does this have to do with the Ruskin Heights tornado? Well, you see, when you search up Tri-State Tornado in your browser, you get this famous image. I think you know where this is going. This is an image of the Ruskin Heights tornado, which tore through the south side of Kansas City on the evening of May 20th, 1957. May 20th, 1957 was a classic Great Plains outbreak, as a 75 to 80 knot jet stream was overspreading an area of dew points reaching up to 18 degrees Celsius or 65 degrees Fahrenheit. Meanwhile, a low pressure system was moving over southeastern Nebraska, and a prominent warm front was draped over portions of Kansas, Missouri, and Oklahoma, and a cold front and dry line were extending southward. The presence of a dry line would most likely result in an outbreak of long-tracking discrete supercells. This is because a dry line only allows small pockets of the warm, moist, unstable air, unlike a cold front which just forces all of that unstable air up. So dry lines result in long-tracking discrete supercells, while cold fronts often result in a messy squall line or QLCS event. Now, many may view a dryline outbreak as more favourable compared to an outbreak with a cold front, as there's overall less widespread convection in the atmosphere. But it's untrue. You see, when a supercell is isolated and has less competition to feed on untapped energy and the moisture in the atmosphere, if it can put down a tornado, it has a much higher chance of being a violent, long-tracking tornado. This brings us back to May 20th, 1957. Wind shear was only ramping up as winds in the lower atmosphere were moving in a northerly direction, while winds in the upper atmosphere were moving northeasterly. Come the evening hours, CAPE had reached into the 3000s, well in excess of the 1000s that forecasters look when predicting outbreaks. At around 6:30, a storm that had formed along the dry line an hour earlier dropped a funnel cloud outside Williamsburg, Kansas. The tornado would grow into a multi-vortex monster and then fully condense into a stout stovepipe. During the strengthening phase, the tornado would take its first two victims, an elderly couple who were about to sit down to dinner. Reportedly, the twister lifted up their house and demolished it. The twister then began to track closer and closer to Ottawa, Kansas. Look at these photos taken outside the airport near Ottawa, Kansas by Dr. Charles Doswell. In this second photo, the tornado looks remarkably similar to the 2023 Kyoto EF4. At the time this photo was taken, it would be destroying rural homes and gravestones. But while the tornado was destroying tombstones, a secondary updraft would form around the ongoing Ruskin Heights tornado. The storm was so strong that it put down a secondary satellite tornado. This secondary tornado would greatly damage homes and earn an F3 rating, dissipating not long after. The twister would continue moving northeast and would turn to the northwest corner of the town of Spring Hill, where the most famous photo of this tornado was taken. As the photo was taken outside the Parsonage Methodist Church by Tim Jackney, the home of the Isham Davis family was being destroyed, leading them to become the next 5 victims of the tornado. As the tornado began to approach the Kansas City metro, the radar at the Kansas City airport began to scan the thunderstorm. As the tornado continued inching closer and closer, the radar would detect a well-defined hook echo, and at this point the Weather Bureau would start receiving reports of a funnel cloud. Quote, radar at the airport reports an echo which appears to be severe. We have just this moment received report of a tornado on the ground moving rapidly northeastward at this exact spot. The tornado moved past the Kansas-Missouri border into the Martin City area, where Ozanam's boys' home took a direct hit from the violent winds. Thankfully, the 23 boys had taken shelter in the basement before the tornado struck. A Methodist church celebrating a birthday party was also struck by the F5 wind, but it had also taken shelter in a basement moments before the tornado hit. Every home in Martin City had received some form of damage, including the Jess and Jim's steakhouse, which thankfully both the owners and their parakeet were unharmed. By the time the tornado moved past Martin City, 2 more were dead and 35 more were injured. At this point, there were so many reports of the photogenic, low precipitation funnel that the Weather Bureau broadcasted a request to no longer report about the tornado unless you're reporting about damage. Now, the tornado was staring through rows of homes, but had yet to even do its worst damage. Ruskin Heights was at the time a neighborhood south of Kansas City that was built in a post-war boom. This meant that most of the homes were single-story, poorly framed homes. This did not bode well, as the F5 tornado began to reach the edges of the neighborhood. The tornado slammed into Ruskin Heights at peak intensity, destroying the shopping center on Blue Ridge Boulevard, along with heavily damaging the Ruskin Heights High School. It then proceeded into the poorly built homes. Thanks to the warnings and broadcasts across radio and TV, many people were able to shelter in their own or neighbors' basements. Apparently, 50 people took shelter in the one basement. Many people decided not to take shelter, and others decided to escape in their own cars. This is a horrible idea, as tornadoes at just F2 strength can throw and destroy cars, meaning an F5 can essentially mangle and tear cars apart. And sadly, many people were unable to outrun this tornado. The damage in Ruskin Heights and nearby neighborhoods was amongst some of the worst damage ever recorded. The windrowing of debris is only comparable to tornadoes like Valonia. The damage is easily the worst recorded in Kansas City. And after 1 hour and 38 minutes, the tornado would lift, just after tearing through Ruskin Heights. Pilots reported debris lofted 30,000 feet to the atmosphere. It tracked 71 miles over Kansas and Missouri, with a peak width of just under half a mile. In total, the damage totaled up to $2.5 million at the time. Despite being a part of a larger widespread outbreak, Ruskin Heights would be the only deadly tornado that day, despite there being an F4 in northeastern Kansas and an F3 in northeastern Oklahoma. In the years following the tornado, Ruskin Heights banded together and built a memorial honoring the 44 that had died in the tornado. However, this isn't where the story ends. Just one last thing I'd like to mention. The monument was unfortunately destroyed in September 2024 by a teenager in a car accident. The people who were affected by the tornado would be inflicted by yet another tragedy, but thankfully it was rebuilt in late 2025. There's a message here somewhere. I can't find it.